The time compass. Imperial Rome, Part 1. All roads lead to Rome. What does this old saying mean? Perhaps it means that all the world's roads met in Rome?
Rome again? I always end up back here.
This expression makes sense because the Romans built a vast network of roads that connected their enormous territory like a spider web. But the saying means a lot more. Because when you say all roads lead to Rome, you're not just referring to the types of roads used by horses and carts, but also to the birth of many of the basic ideas of Western civilization. The Roman Empire was so influential, not just in its time, but as the basis of everything Western civilization has done since, that people believe nearly everything that was said, everything that was done, and everything that was thought in later centuries has some sort of connection to the Romans. Their empire was one of the most important in Earth's history. Romulus and Remus. The city of Rome was born on the banks of the Tiber River in about 750 BC. At that time, there were various Greek cities that had settled on the coast of the Italian peninsula. And Rome, which was still very small, like a newborn child, began to grow by copying the model of these flourishing Greek city-states. The influence of the Greek cities was so strong over the Romans that they claimed to have descended from the heroes of the Trojan War. Two of the main heroes were Achilles and Hector. But the Romans said they were related to Hector, that is, to the Trojans. The story goes that Aeneas, a Trojan hero who was the son of Venus and later abandoned the burning city of Troy, traveled for thousands of kilometers until finally settling on the Italian peninsula, where one of his sons built a new kingdom. Many years later, twins were born. Romulus and Remus were descendants of Aeneas. This meant that they would one day grow up to rule the kingdom. But their ambitious uncle, King Amulius, decided to abandon them in a basket on the banks of the Tiber River, so he could continue ruling instead. The legend goes that they were found by a mother wolf named Lupa, who discovered the two newborn boys and suckled them as if they were her own cubs to keep them alive. When Romulus and Remus got older, they wanted to found a city. But the two brothers got into a fight over the city, and Remus died. Romulus became king and founded the city, naming it after himself, Romulus, Rome. The legend of the founding of Rome says that Romulus was a son of Mars, the god of war, which meant that powerful and aggressive blood flowed through his veins. But it is also said that Aeneas, their great-great-grandfather, had been the son of Venus, the goddess of love and beauty.
Let's just say that I, Romulus, and all Romans were the result of an explosive mix. War and love.
The Republic. During its beginnings, Rome was ruled by kings. When one king died,
My fellow...
the elite met to elect a successor. So really, power was always in the hands of the elite in Rome. And these people called themselves the patricians. The patricians were the citizens who belonged to the oldest families in the city. A group of patricians, generally the wisest and most experienced, formed a council that limited the supreme power of the king. This council was known as the Senate. The Roman Senate increased its power and prestige until the year 510 BC, when, after a particularly bad king, the citizens of Rome kicked the king out and proclaimed that Rome would never again be ruled by a king.
From now on, Rome is ruled by the people.
This was the beginning of the Roman Republic, the first known republic in history. The Roman Republic worked well, but sometimes there was trouble. The patricians, who had lots of money, land, and power, would often be at odds with the plebeians. the generally poorer and more numerous section of everyone in the city who, well, wasn't a patrician. The plebeians would call for better conditions, more food, and new land. So the Senate decided that if Rome was to grow, it would need to obtain more wealth and more land. This meant building a strong army to expand their territory. First throughout the Italic Peninsula, and then conquering Greece, Gaul, and finally the powerful city of Carthage. And soon they controlled the whole Mediterranean Sea. But as Rome's territory and wealth increased, it became harder to govern.
Mamma mia.
Then, a very successful general appeared who stood out from the crowd.
I, Julius Caesar, will rule Rome by myself. Don't worry, I'll sort out this mess.
Julius Caesar was a very popular general who had won many battles. His life and the actions of taking control and leading Rome have made him one of the most famous figures in history. And it marked the beginning of Rome's most glorious era. The Roman Empire. When Julius Caesar took control of Rome, he was loved by the people. He was on his way to being the ruler of Rome. But the senators didn't like this idea at all, because it would mean they were no longer in charge. So they organized a plot and they stabbed him to death at the foot of the stairs in front of the Senate.
Oh, but I still had so much to do.
After his death, Rome was in chaos until Octavian, Julius Caesar's adopted son, became the first Roman emperor, naming himself Caesar Augustus. Augustus took charge and was such a great ruler that he ended a century of civil wars and gave Rome a period of peace, prosperity, and imperial grandeur. But the Romans were never happy with the territory they had. They always wanted more and more and more. This ambition could only be carried out thanks to the creation of the most powerful army in the world. Many of their strategies were based on the examples of Alexander the Great Macedonian conqueror. Roman soldiers were organized into units each called a phalanx and used different formations, such as the turtle formation, where the soldiers were protected on all sides by their shields, making them nearly impenetrable. What's more, behind the legions came the assault machines, capable of firing giant wooden spears. Or the catapults, which could launch giant rocks or enormous balls of fire. During the first years of the empire, Rome conquered land from the Atlantic Ocean to the Euphrates River, and from England to the Sahara Desert. Wow, the Romans kept conquering territory and expanding their empire for centuries. Some of the greatest expansions happened during the 2nd century AD, during the reigns of the emperors Claudius and Trajan. Let's dig a little deeper with our time compass to discover the history of universities. What was happening in Britain while the Romans were extending their empire to the ends of the world? In the year 43 BC, the Roman Emperor Claudius sent troops to Britain to conquer the Celtic peoples that were living on the island. The Celts fought a fierce battle, but like so many others, they could not defeat the powerful Roman war machine. The Romans built fortified cities and roads, extending their empire to include Britain. They called one of the cities they founded Londinium. Does it ring a bell? Sure, London. But it wasn't easy going for the Romans. 16 years later, around 60 BC, Boudica, queen of the Iceni, led a major uprising. Boudica was a fearsome, highly intelligent Celtic warrior with long red hair that fell to her waist. And she did not waste any time. Furious at the humiliation suffered by her people, she united many Celts, and under her command, they captured London, burnt it down, and kicked the Romans out. But a year later, the Romans sent new legions to recover control of the area and defeat the rebels. The story goes that for every Roman soldier, there were 5 Celtic warriors.
Outnumbered 5-1! The Romans didn't stand a chance.
Ah, but you're wrong, Pipo. The Romans showed that their strict discipline and techniques of war were better than having lots of untrained soldiers. The Celts were defeated time and again after many intense battles. Boudica was pushed back and was finally defeated. The Celts, despite their numbers and fierceness in battle, were conquered. Coming up in the next episode, Imperial Rome Part 2.
Tickets for today's epic battle. More epic than yesterday, but not as epic as tomorrow. Tickets! Who needs tickets?
But who were these men who risked their lives in the aim of entertaining the people? They were generally prisoners of war, or criminals who had been made slaves. At the end of a fight, when a gladiator was wounded and fell to the ground, the emperor and the spectators would choose if he deserved to live or be killed. The best gladiators, who won many battles, were heroes to the people. They had fame and money, and if they were good enough, they were freed from slavery and allowed to bask in their fame and wealth for the rest of their lives.